Hi, everyone. I'm David Drever. Work with Portivity and I'm a Microsoft MVP in Microsoft 365 and security.
Hi there, I'm Joanne Klein and I am an MVP as well, and I work for myself with a company called Next Novus. So what are we going to talk about today, Dave?
So, what I want to talk about today, Joanne, is actually the concept of data classification in Microsoft Purview. It seems like something we talk about often already, but the reason I want to talk about is there's this common misconception, and one that I used to fall under as well, that classification is the act of labeling your content. And really it's not. And if you look at the Microsoft documentation from the perspective of what it actually is, some of the documentation tends to make a little more sense. So I'll explain my take on it and see what you think.
Sure. Okay.
But my take on it is classification of content is the actual act of scanning and identifying sensitive information, PII, something that exists in that document, and like having that document saying, okay, it's got a credit card number in it, or it's got a bank account number. Hey, there's an ATA routing number in there. That is your act of classification. And you kind of see some evidence of that today. If you look at the Data Explorer in Purview, it's already doing that. It's calling it classification there.
Right.
But what do you think?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I think probably the words that are used inside of Purview under information protection. So the classifiers, sensitive information types, or SITs are a classifier. Exact data match is a classifier. Trainable classifiers. So they're classifying the data. I guess that makes sense. It's the classification of, the type of content that's sensitive content, mostly, that's in that document. And then how would you say that relates then to a sensitivity label? Because I feel when I talk to my customers and other colleagues over the years, sometimes we use sensitivity label and classification like interchangeably. So what do you think the difference is there?
Well, and I think that, and that's the problem, because classifying it fits both, right? I'm classifying this as an internal document, or I'm classifying this as a restricted document. So, but really what you're doing at that point is that you are identifying it as a particular classification or security classification, right?
Yeah.
So maybe identifying is the better term. I'm not too sure. We can't, labeling it gets a little, to me, labeling is too general, and because you got labeling and retention as well, right? So that's what so to me, it's more of a security identification, I think, is more as opposed to a classification, if that makes sense to me anyways.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think when you think about all of the data that you have across your environment, not all of it is sensitive, and you need to be able to differentiate what you consider sensitive and that you might want to put some more controls on versus things that aren't. So the classifiers and the way something is classified really helps inform, I would say, the type of sensitivity label that you're going to put on something. So there's, going to be some kind of a mapping at the end of the day on your sensitivity label taxonomy, highly confidential. We want to stamp that as a sensitivity label on files that have this kind of classification.
Exactly.
I would say. And it could be a number of classifiers that match on there, but I can see that kind of mapping being a way that makes sense to kind of map your sensitivity labels to the way they're classified.
Yeah. And you and I were talking about this earlier. If you take a look at, and maybe you want to talk about this a little bit more yourself as well, but if you do an on-demand classification of content, if you take a look at the information that's sent back, it's actually called classification info, right?
It is. What classifiers did it find? What is the confidence level? What is the count of each of them? I mean, there's a whole bunch of information. And there can be many matches, as we all know. When you go into Data Explorer, you can see matches for all kinds of SITs that some don't make sense for your tenant, but some do. So I can. That's kind of where that information is revealed.
Yeah, and I think when
Yeah.
you're reviewing the Microsoft documentation, if you come at it with this mindset, it kind of makes a little more sense. Like I know back when I thought the classification was kind of like the labeling of the content,
Yes.
some of that documentation didn't make sense when Microsoft talked about automatically classifying data, but it has nothing to do with the label. And
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it throws you off. But if you think about it, when they
Mhm.
say automatically classifying the data, they're just saying, is there a sit in there,
Yeah.
or is there a classifier that you defined in there?
Yeah.
And that's the act of the classification.
Yeah. Makes more sense now. So
Yeah,
I'm glad we cleared that up.
exactly. All right, everyone. I think that kind of clears things up for today. And if
Yeah.
you have any questions, throw them in the comments. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.